Hey there friends, my name is Andy and today we are going to compare and talk about some of the most important changes between the original Rome Total War and Total War Rome Remastered, some which I dislike and some which I personally love. But first, if you enjoy what I create, I'd appreciate it if you left a like, a comment and subscribe to the channel. So, on to Total War Rome Remastered. Rome Total War is one of the best games Creative Assembly has ever made. When it released in 2004, it brought groundbreaking visuals, a powerful soundtrack, and deep campaign systems, ensuring that the game remains one of the best strategy games to date. The remaster, made by Feral Interactive, is much more than a simple visual upgrade to 4K, as the game now looks and plays very differently in certain aspects. Now, before we start, there are many changes in this remaster, both graphically and gameplay-wise. We know and have been told from countless influencers that we can choose to toggle these changes on and off and play Rome Total War completely like it was originally. But this is not true, at least not from what I'm seeing. Yes, you can turn off the game mechanics and certain changes, but if you want to play Rome Total War as it was, with optimizations and the original map and UI, then I haven't seen any evidence that this is possible. If I'm wrong, then correct me and provide evidence, but from what I'm seeing, this will not be possible. We will start by going through the campaign changes and look at the battle changes later. But you know, we'll start at the very beginning. The main menu. Do you remember when Total War menus used to be iconic? When there was a theme to them all? In the original Rome Total War, the menu had this unique red color scheme, with battle scenes constantly playing out in the background. The loading screens reflected the main menu and continued this red army-centric scheme. Moving backgrounds and uniform colors became a tradition when this continued in Medieval 2 Total War and all of its expansions, with Empire and even Napoleon. Well, the remastered menu looks like this, just some fairly standard concept art images. The loading screens are also completely stripped of any creativity, showing only landscapes rather than following a theme like it did before. Now, don't take this as me saying the game is bad because of this, but there was a conscious artistic decision on behalf of Creative Assembly as to why they created the original menu screens in the first place. Likewise, there must have been some conscious decision as to why they changed it, and I really wonder why they did, because it kinda sucks, you know? This new menu doesn't really scream Salve Imperator as much, you know? Anyways, moving on. First up is graphics. Rome Total War, quite honestly, still holds up to this day. It's by no means an insanely modern looking or textured map, but it is stylized and crafted in a way which makes it almost timeless. The transitions from ocean to land is soft and smooth, the colors are comfortable to look at, and the map is detailed, scattered with cities, resources, mountains and volcanoes, and wonders of the world, a feature which was completely removed from the games after it. Now, let's move on to the campaign map in the remaster. It's immediately obvious that things have changed. The map is even more detailed, with patches of land reserved for crops, forests are marked more clearly, trees and cities are more detailed, and beautiful reflections and underwater shallows have been added to the oceans. This definitely looks like something that could have been made today, even though it remains a less modern looking game than a fully fledged new title would. Even though the new map looks great, I do have some qualms about the colors. In the original game, the colors on the campaign map looked fairly natural. Not really popping, but not appearing too dim either. Now, however, I get the feeling that the saturation has been turned way up. The map is so much more light green in a way which seems more cartoony, and what's worse in my opinion, the mountains just don't look right at all. They used to be a kind of grey and stone-like with snow on top, but are now painted with this weird textured new brown color, reminding me more of Great Canyon mountains than European ones. Second is the UI, which is where we see the most amount of changes. Rome Total War's UI was stylish and simple to use. You had everything in one place essentially, at the bottom of the screen. Here is where you recruited units and raised buildings, and the map in the bottom corner was large and in my opinion, offered a good, realistic take on the world map. I just really like the way it was drawn. The remaster has revamped the system completely, so much so that I don't really know where to start. The UI is now divided into windows at the bottom and in every corner of the screen. They appear and disappear depending on whether you've selected an army or a settlement, and expands if you want more information about different factions, your economy, or missions. There is more space for the information provided, and bigger windows in general, and I do think some of it is for the better. For example, I think it's a good change that you can always find your messages, and that it's easier to get the information about characters and so on. Now, I am in no way opposed to UI changes. In fact, I think the UI in the original is a bit too large, especially considering that you can't scale it. But there's something about the new UI that just doesn't sit quite right with me. For one, some of the changes remind me of the first version of the UI in Imperator Rome, with big circles symbolizing different aspects of government. This was largely hated by the community because it just didn't make much sense, and didn't really use the screen space productively either. But what's worse is that the UI now looks so much like something made for an iPad game, which is supposed to be easier to play with fingers. The big difference though is that this is a PC game, with inherently much better precision than a tablet. Before, windows would rightfully pop up at the side of the screen when selecting generals, while now, everything is straight up in the center of the screen, which just feels like it would unnaturally halt the gameplay. Therefore, I'm kinda disappointed that they chose this route, especially considering that even though the new UI is supposed to be easier to navigate, it still manages to clutter the screen like never before. I really think having the menus positioned all over is an absolutely wrong choice, and makes the game de facto more tedious to deal with. If we compare this to other Total War games, I think Total War struck a perfect balance between simplicity and depth in both Shogun and Attila, and it really bothers me that the remaster doesn't do something more creative with its UI, when it has a perfect chance to move away from both the big UI in the original and to change it up from the touch-based one in the iPad version. At the very least, it's a good thing that the UI can be scaled this time around, so hopefully it won't seem like as big of a deal when we get to test it out ourselves. Next, we have day and night changes. In Rome Total War, they had yet to implement any sort of day and night settings. Night battles were only first implemented in Barbarian Invasion, but now they have been implemented in Rome as well. But we're still talking about the campaign map here, and what's really cool is that if you play a night battle in Rome, the campaign map will now also turn to night. That's a really nice change of scenery. Even though I do wish they would have gone all out and just implement the seamless day and night cycle that they have in the newer titles. We also have a new agent, the Merchant, which was completely absent in Rome Total War, but which you could use in Medieval 2. The Merchant lets you extract resources and can also block off the selected resources from your enemies. I think it's really cool that they've added this feature, since more content is often good. In the campaign conclusion, I think we have some positives and some negatives here. The positives are mostly great, with some really nice graphical enhancements, and some added features. However, the fact that the UI really looks like it's made for a touchscreen is something that bothers me, but I will reserve full judgment until I play the game myself. So then, onto the battle map. Here too, the visual upgrades are obvious. This is what units look like in the original Rome Total War. They look surprisingly sharp actually, but there's not much depth to shadows and lighting of the unit models. And this is how they look in the remaster. The lighting and shadows have received massive improvements here, with the units actually looking like they have some true depth right now. In an earlier video, based on released screenshots, I mentioned that the individual units still look the same. But I was wrong, probably since I looked at this image, where everybody wore literally the same armor and helmets. So the units have been updated, and their appearance do in fact vary, which is awesome. What's even more awesome is that the units' look will vary depending on which region they were recruited from. So your empire will now truly be made up of people from your whole empire. In a perfect Roman world, you would have been able to implement recruitment and citizenship laws for who you could actually rightfully recruit as soldiers. But I guess we can't always get everything, even though we should. Either way, the units and the battle maps look much better now, and the updated visuals all seem tremendous. Furthermore, the UI has clearly been given a major overhaul here as well. This is what the UI looks like in Rome Total War. It's virtually the same idea as on the campaign map, with the bottom part being used for the unit cards. It works really well, but does take up quite a lot of space. Now, this is what the revamped UI looks like in the remaster. It follows in the same vein as the campaign UI changes, but now it feels even more iPad-y. The unit cards have some awkward round edges, and the color scheme is kind of off with that whole green thing going on. And I dislike how they kind of stick out so much, even though they technically might take up less space than the original UI. I just wonder, again, why they chose not to go for something as simple and elegant as the one in Attila or Shogun, where it takes up less space, but still looks aesthetically pleasing. Some more UI stuff now. In the original Rome, units did not have range arcs, so you could never be really sure of how long your units can fire unless you actively remembered it. In newer titles though, we've gotten these markers that show us how far units can fire. This has now been implemented in Rome Remastered. While I'm happy about this and think it is a really useful change, once again I think it's really poorly implemented. The markers just take up so much space, and the yellow-orange color schemes kinda stands out so much that it interferes with the otherwise realistically grounded visuals of the game. I also really hate that they decided to add these super white arrow and pila tails, which I'm afraid we won't be able to turn off in the settings. It just looks really bad, and I love that in the original Rome, arrows actually looked like arrows and not like some white magic things. It's yet another way the game is turning more arcadey, a change I personally don't appreciate. And those were, in my opinion, the most important comparisons and changes between Rome Total War and Rome Remastered. I listed some positives and negatives, but overall, I'm very excited to see more of the game, to learn how it really works, and to see the upgrades coming to both the Barbarian Invasion and the Alexander expansions, which we haven't really seen yet. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.